Creepy stranger encounters at gas station. It was the kind of gas station you pass on lonely highways and never think twice about, unless you're unlucky enough to run out of fuel at 2 in the morning. One of those places that looked like it had been built in the 70s and then abandoned by time, except someone still kept the lights on, a yellow flicker against the dark stretch of nowhere. The sign, Smith's Fuel and Food, buzzed and stuttered. One of the bulbs burnt out so that it read "Essis." The parking lot was empty, except for a single rust-colored pickup truck parked off to the side, the kind of vehicle that looked like it hadn't moved in weeks, its tires soft, its windows smeared with grime. Inside the glass panel door of the station, fluorescent light hummed, casting a pale glow over the aisles of chips and candy that never looked appetizing under that sort of lighting. The place smelled faintly of gasoline and old coffee. You know how there are certain places that don't feel right, even if there's nothing overtly wrong? That was the vibe here. Something in the silence. Something in the way the crickets outside weren't chirping, as if even they avoided this patch of ground. My hands were shaking a little as I pulled up to the pump. The needle on my gauge had been pinned for 15 miles, and I had been praying for a station to show up. When the glowing sign finally appeared on the horizon, I told myself it was luck. Now, looking at it up close, it didn't feel like luck at all. It felt like a trap. I killed the engine, stepped out, and realized how deathly quiet it was. No cars passing on the road. No wind. Just the faint hum of the overhead lights and the smell of gasoline, sharp and metallic, like blood. I swiped my card at the pump. Nothing. The machine just blinked with a cracked green screen that read, "See cashier." That meant going inside. And I didn't want to go inside. Every bone in my body screamed not to. But gas was life out here, and without it I'd be stranded. The glass door resisted when I pulled on it, sticky with age, then gave way with a squeal that echoed too loudly in the silence. A bell chimed above me, though it was tinny and broken, like it was chiming from underwater. The air inside was stale, faintly moldy, and the hum of the fluorescent lights drilled into my skull. Rows of snacks stretched in neat lines, though the shelves looked dusty, untouched. An old man stood behind the counter. At least, I thought it was a man. He was tall but bent, shoulders hunched, with a gray flannel shirt that seemed too big for his frail frame. His skin was pale in the buzzing light, his face lined and sunken like parchment paper. His eyes, though, that's what I remember most. Yellowish, watery eyes that seemed to look through me instead of at me. "Pump's not working," I said, my voice too loud in the stillness. He didn't answer right away. Just stared, his head tilting slightly, like he was studying a specimen. Then his lips cracked into a thin smile. "Cash only," he rasped. His voice was dry, like leaves crunching. I pulled out my wallet, thumbed through the bills. He watched my hands closely, like a predator waiting for the right move. I slid a 20 across the counter, and his hand came down slow to take it. His fingers were long, bony, with yellow nails. They brushed mine for half a second, cold as ice. As he shuffled to the register, I glanced around the store again. The aisles were filled, but the packages looked old, faded, like they hadn't been rotated in years. A jar of pickles near the counter had a layer of dust so thick it looked like fur. And then I saw it. A door at the far back, half hidden by a shelf of motor oil. A metal door with a padlock. Something about it, it was wrong. Wrong in the way your stomach drops before a car crash. The old man followed my gaze. His watery eyes hardened, his jaw clenching for just a moment before the smile returned, wider this time, showing too many teeth. "Don't mind that," he whispered. "Staff only." But the way he said it made my skin crawl. I nodded at the old man, though my stomach was tight, nodded like a rope being pulled too hard. Something about the way he said, "staff only," felt rehearsed, like he'd said it 1,000 times before, maybe to people who'd asked about that same door. Maybe to people who hadn't come back out. I told myself not to think like that, but the thought burrowed in anyway, wriggling like a worm in my brain. I forced my eyes away, back to the counter, and watched as he opened the register. The drawer slid out with a creak that sounded like bones grinding. Inside, there were only a handful of crumpled bills, like he hadn't done business in months. He dropped my 20 in, closed the drawer, and slid a small paper slip toward me, handwritten numbers scrawled on it in shaky ink. Pump 3. No receipt, no printed paper, just that slip. His handwriting looked almost childlike, uneven and nervous, the kind of writing you see in letters from old hospitals. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to. Thanks, I muttered and turned to leave. The bell above the door chimed again as I stepped back into the night, the heavy stillness swallowing me. For a second, I glanced toward the rust-colored pickup parked in the shadows. My headlights had caught it earlier, but now, in the flickering yellow glow of the station lights, I noticed something I hadn't before. The windshield was spider-webbed with cracks, like a fist or a head had slammed into it from the inside. My breath caught, and I told myself it was just age, just damage from the years. But then I saw something darker, shapes in the back seat. Blankets, maybe. Or bags. Or something curled up. I couldn't tell, and I didn't want to stare long enough to figure it out. I slid back into my car, locking the doors before I even turned the key. Pump 3 was just a few feet away, the nozzle dangling like a limp arm. I got out again, my nerves stretched thin, and shoved the nozzle into the tank. The pump sputtered, coughed, then began to flow with a groan deep in its metal guts. The numbers on the screen ticked slowly, the faint click-click of the counter echoing too loudly in the silence. I kept glancing around, my eyes darting to the road, to the truck, to the glass door of the station where I could still see the old man standing behind the counter, staring out at me. He wasn't moving, wasn't doing anything, just watching. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. His face was pale and pressed close to the glass, his mouth barely moving, as though whispering something I couldn't hear. My chest tightened. Maybe he was just talking to himself, some old guy with too much loneliness in his bones. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like he was whispering to me. Then came the sound. A faint knock. Not from the store. Not from the pump. From behind me. I spun, the nozzle jerking in my hand, gasoline splattering on my shoes. The pickup truck. Its back door was open now. Just a crack, but open. I froze, breath caught in my throat. I hadn't heard it before. Hadn't seen it before. But now it was open, and the shadows inside looked deeper, darker than they should have been. I told myself to leave. Just pull the damn nozzle out, screw the cap, and drive. But my hands didn't listen. My eyes didn't listen. They kept drifting toward that truck, toward the crack in the door. And then, in that darkness, something shifted. Just slightly. The pale shape like a face just for a heartbeat. Watching me. I yanked the nozzle free, gasoline spilling onto the concrete. I didn't care. I shoved it back into the pump and scrambled into my car, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. My keys slipped once, twice, before I jammed them into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, I dared one last look at the station. The old man was gone from the window. And the truck door was fully open now. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, staring at the gaping mouth of that truck door in the rearview mirror. My headlights caught the chrome handle, gleaming faintly, but the inside was pure black. Empty, or not empty? I didn't want to know. I threw the car into drive, tires squealing as I lurched forward, but something stopped me from flooring it down the highway. Call it morbid curiosity. Call it stupidity. But my eyes betrayed me again, dragging toward the gas station window, toward the place where the old man had stood only a minute ago. The glass reflected nothing now, just rows of empty aisles behind him, humming beneath the fluorescent lights. Empty. Too empty. My chest heaved as though I had run a mile, and every part of me screamed to just go, just vanish into the night. But then I heard it. A scrape. Long, slow, metallic. Like nails dragging across sheet metal. It came from behind me, from the direction of the truck. I froze, my foot hovering over the accelerator. Another scrape followed, this one sharper, louder, closer, the sound carrying unnaturally clear across the still night air. Against every instinct, I turned my head. The truck door was wide open now. All the way. Something pale hung halfway out. An arm, maybe. Thin, skin stretched tight over bone, the flesh sagging in unnatural folds. It dangled like a puppet's limb, fingers twitching slightly, the nails long and cracked. I slammed my hand down on the horn without thinking, a blast of sound shattering the silence. The arm twitched violently, retreating into the dark of the truck in a whip-like motion. And then the scraping started again. Faster now. Louder. Like something shifting its weight across the rusted body of the truck, climbing, pulling. My car vibrated beneath me as though the sound was inside my chest, rattling through my bones. I slammed the gearshift into reverse, jerking the car back, gravel crunching under my tires. My headlights flashed across the side of the station, the cracked sign buzzing faintly. For a split second, I swore I saw movement inside the store again. A figure darting between the aisles. Not the old man. Something smaller. Quicker. My heart stuttered, panic clawing up my throat. I wrenched the wheel, spinning back toward the road. The car fishtailed before straightening, headlights cutting a weak tunnel into the endless black. I pressed harder on the gas, but my foot felt heavy, sluggish, like I was wading through water. I could still hear the scraping, even though the truck was behind me now. It followed, echoing in my ears, louder, closer, like something was riding the sound itself, clinging to me no matter how far I went. I didn't dare look back again. The road stretched on, an empty ribbon disappearing into the dark, the horizon swallowed by black sky. My gas tank should have been full. I'd pumped nearly $20 into it, but the needle hovered just above empty, trembling like it was afraid to move. My breath came ragged, each inhale sharp, tasting of gasoline and metal. I kept glancing at the clock on my dash, but the glowing green numbers hadn't changed. Still 2:13 a.m. No seconds ticking. No movement. Frozen. My brain screamed it wasn't possible, but the numbers held still, stubborn and unblinking, as though time itself had stopped the moment I left that station. Faint at first, curling in from the back seat. A dry rasp, words I couldn't make out. My stomach dropped, ice flooding my veins. I didn't want to turn. God, I didn't want to. But the rearview mirror tilted just enough for me to see the shape. Something hunched in the back seat. A face pale as ash, pressed close to the glass, grinning. My scream tore out raw, echoing in the locked car, but when I jerked my head around, the seat was empty. The whisper clung to the air like smoke, curling around my ears, just loud enough to drown out my own thoughts. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my nails digging into the cheap leather, forcing myself to keep my eyes on the broken ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead. Every instinct screamed to look again, to check the back seat, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind, but I knew if I turned, if I gave it that acknowledgement, something worse would be waiting for me. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator, but the car felt sluggish, heavy, as though I were dragging something unseen behind me. The headlights carved a narrow path into the night, but the darkness pressed in thicker, heavier, as though the world outside that pale cone of light had stopped existing altogether. The whisper shifted, growing clearer, shaping itself into words that coiled around my skull like vines. You shouldn't have stopped. The voice was thin, brittle, like dry paper tearing, but unmistakably human, or something trying to sound human. My throat locked, my breath hitching in shallow bursts. I told myself I was hallucinating, that exhaustion and fear were playing tricks on me. But the whisper came again, closer this time, so close I swore I felt the brush of cold breath against the nape of my neck. You saw too much. My hands shook violently on the wheel. I fumbled with the radio, desperate for noise, for anything to drown out that voice. Static hissed through the speakers, sharp and ugly, but beneath it, I thought I heard another sound. A faint, muffled thumping, steady, rhythmic, like something locked in the trunk. My heart lurched. I turned the knob harder, static giving way to a fractured burst of some late-night talk show, but the voices dissolved into garbled nonsense, words backwards, stretched, inhuman. I snapped the radio off, silence crashing back over me, and in that silence, the thumping grew louder. Panic clawed at my chest. I told myself not to stop, not to check, but the thought of something moving in the trunk was unbearable. My foot eased off the gas, the car coasting, headlights flickering against the dark trees that lined the road. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, the tires crunching to a halt, the engine idling low and uncertain. For a long moment, I just sat there listening. The thumping had stopped. The whisper was gone. Only silence now. I told myself to drive. Just drive. But my hand moved on its own, reaching for the door handle. The night air rushed in cold and sharp, carrying the heavy smell of damp earth and gasoline. I circled the car slowly, gravel crunching under my shoes, my breath puffing white in the cold. The trunk loomed ahead, black and impenetrable. My keys trembled in my hand as I slid one into the lock. For a moment, I hesitated, my body screaming against it. Then I twisted. The trunk creaked open. Empty. No bags, no tools, nothing but the thin gray lining of the trunk's interior. Relief washed over me so sudden it almost knocked me back, a laugh bubbling up, sharp and broken. But the relief didn't last. Because there, in the center of the trunk, was a handprint. Faint, smudged into the fabric. A handprint too small to be mine, too long-fingered to be normal. And it was wet, shining in the weak glow of the taillights, like fresh oil or blood. My stomach lurched. I slammed the trunk shut and spun back toward the driver's side. But the car wasn't empty anymore. Through the window, in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, I saw someone sitting in the passenger seat. The sight froze me where I stood, every drop of blood in my body sinking into my feet. The figure in the passenger seat sat unnaturally still, head angled toward me but bowed just enough that the face was lost in shadow. My own headlights threw pale light across its body, but the details blurred, like the shape didn't want to be defined. It looked both solid and unreal at once, an impression more than a person, something carved out of darkness and barely wearing the outline of flesh. I forced my eyes away, forced my mind to make sense of it. Maybe a reflection, maybe some trick of the glass. But no reflection breathed like that. No trick of the eye shifted slightly, shoulders rising and falling in slow, deliberate rhythm. I wanted to run. God, I wanted to sprint down that black ribbon of road and never look back. But where would I go? 10 miles of nothing in every direction. The car was my only way out, and whatever was sitting inside it knew that. I edged closer, my shoes crunching against the gravel, my breath fogging up in the cold night air. My keys burned in my palm, slick with sweat. I tightened my grip, ready to fling the door open and drag it out, fight it if I had to. But then it lifted its head. The face, or what should have been a face, was pale, yes, but not with skin. It was a blur of shifting gray, features refusing to hold still, like a photograph smudged in water. Only the eyes stayed clear. Wide, yellowed eyes, the same watery pits that had watched me from the gas station counter. The same eyes that hadn't blinked once while I pumped my gas. My stomach heaved, my knees threatening to buckle. "You shouldn't have looked," it whispered. The same brittle, papery rasp I'd heard before. Only this time, the words weren't in my head. They came from its mouth, or whatever twisted hole passed for one. I stumbled back, gravel sliding under my feet, and nearly toppled. My vision blurred, panic flooding my skull with static. The figure twitched violently, its limbs jerking in sharp, insect-like motions, as though it was fighting the shape of the body it wore. Then, with a sound like tearing fabric, it collapsed inward. 1 second it was there, filling the seat with its awful weight, and the next the seat was empty. Just leather and shadows. I don't remember opening the driver's door. Don't remember collapsing into the seat, don't remember slamming the locks down one by one. But I was back inside, my chest heaving, the steering wheel slick with sweat beneath my shaking hands. The car reeked of gasoline, sharp and dizzying, like the fumes had seeped in through the vents. I twisted the key hard, the engine coughing once, twice, before roaring awake. My headlights flared bright across the trees, and for one awful heartbeat, I saw shapes standing between the trunks. Dozens of them. Pale, blurry outlines, each with those same yellow eyes glowing faintly, all turned toward me. Watching. I screamed and tore out onto the road, tires spitting gravel. The world blurred past in streaks of dark and light, but the shapes stayed with me, flickering in the periphery, always just out of reach, like they were pacing me through the woods. The whispers came back, curling in around my ears, overlapping, a chorus of brittle voices. "You saw too much. You saw too much. You saw too much. Over and over, drilling into my skull until I thought I would claw my ears bloody just to make it stop. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the voices ceased. The shapes melted into the dark. Silence crashed back in, heavy and absolute. For the first time since I'd pulled into that cursed gas station, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd escaped. But when I looked at the dashboard clock, it still read 2:13 a.m. The frozen clock gnawed at my brain more than the whispers had. 2:13 a.m., glowing green, stubborn and still. It was impossible, had to be. I'd been driving for what felt like half an hour, maybe more, and yet the time hadn't moved a second. My body told me I was tired, my legs stiff from pressing the pedals, my throat raw from gasping for air, but the world around me seemed locked in that single cursed minute. I kept glancing at my phone, desperate for something to anchor me, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Black as stone, no matter how long I pressed. Dead battery, or something worse. The road stretched on endlessly, the white lines flashing beneath my headlights in hypnotic rhythm, but no landmarks appeared. No towns, no houses, not even the flicker of another car's taillights in the distance. Just black woods pressing in on both sides, trees too tall, too close, their branches hanging overhead like skeletal arms. It felt less like a highway and more like a tunnel, narrowing the farther I went. The gas gauge dipped lower and lower, the needle quivering on empty again, though I'd filled the tank minutes ago, or hours ago. My chest tightened as the engine sputtered once, coughing like a dying man. No, 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 I muttered, slamming the wheel with my palm, willing it to keep going. The whisper in the back seat didn't return, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something rode with me, unseen, crouched just outside my vision, waiting. I tried the radio again, fingers trembling, and the static that poured out this time wasn't random. It was rhythmic. Breathing. Slow, heavy breathing that matched the rise and fall of my chest. And underneath it, faint and warbling, came a sound that hollowed me out, the chiming of a bell. The same broken bell that had greeted me when I stepped into the gas station. My hands went cold, knuckles white against the wheel. The sound grew louder, swelling until it filled the car, until it felt like the bell was inside my skull, striking bone instead of metal. My vision swam, the road blurring into streaks of black and gray. I fought to stay conscious, blinking hard, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. And then, in the harsh flare of my headlights, something appeared. At first I thought it was another car, parked sideways across the road. But as I got closer, I realized what it was, the gas station. Smith's Fuel and Food, standing there in the middle of the empty road like it had been uprooted and dropped into my path. The buzzing sign still read Teaxes, the glass door still glowing pale beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. My heart seized. I slammed the brakes, tires screaming, the car jerking to a stop just feet from the curb. It couldn't be. I had driven straight, never turned, never circled back. And yet here it was, waiting for me. The pickup truck was there too, rusted and broken, its door still hanging wide, black interior yawning like a mouth. Only this time, it wasn't empty. A figure sat in the driver's seat. Upright. Motionless. Watching. I couldn't see its face, but I knew those eyes would be waiting for me if I got close enough. Those yellow, watery eyes. The whisper returned then, curling soft against my ear, as though the thing were sitting right beside me. You never left. My pulse thundered in my ears as I sat frozen behind the wheel, the gas station looming ahead like a mirage I couldn't drive through. The headlights washed over its walls, bleaching the yellow paint into something corpse-white, and the buzzing sign above seemed louder now, crackling like angry insects. I wanted to put the car in reverse, turn around, find some other way out, but when I checked the rearview mirror, the road behind me was gone. Not just dark, gone. The woods had closed in like a curtain, leaving nothing but black, as though the car itself had been swallowed into the station's orbit. I was trapped in its gravity, a fly caught in the web. The figure in the pickup hadn't moved, but the weight of its gaze pressed against me like hands on my chest. I could feel those eyes, ancient and wet, peeling me open without ever blinking. My mouth was dry as sand, my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth, but some desperate animal part of me whispered that if I just drove forward, straight through those flickering lights, straight past that rusted truck, I might break the loop. Maybe it was a test. Maybe the only way out was through. I pressed my foot to the gas. The engine growled weakly, the car inching forward like it was reluctant to obey. The closer I got, the worse the air felt, thick, metallic, buzzing in my teeth. The windows rattled with a sound I realized was laughter. Not loud, not manic, but faint and steady, like children giggling behind a closed door. It came from everywhere at once, bleeding from the speakers, the vents, even the trembling dashboard clock that still glowed its eternal 2:13 a.m. I squeezed the wheel tighter, forcing the car forward, eyes locked on the glass door of the station. The old man was there again. Standing exactly where he'd been the first time, behind the counter, flannel shirt sagging on his frame, those eyes pinned on me like nails. Only now his mouth was wide open. Too wide. His jaw unhinged in a grotesque oval, his throat a dark tunnel that seemed to stretch forever. The laughter swelled, warping, until it sounded like it was pouring from that gaping maw. The pickup's engine coughed to life. My heart skipped, a cold jolt shooting through my veins. Its headlights flared weakly, twin sickly yellow beams cutting across the lot. The figure inside shifted, hands rising to the wheel. The truck's door creaked shut with a slam that echoed like a gunshot. Panic detonated inside me. I floored the gas, the car leaping forward with a scream of tires. The station blurred past, the pickup's lights snapping into my peripheral. For a moment, I thought I'd made it, thought I'd broken free. But the road ahead didn't open. Instead, the headlights fell on another gas station. Smith's Fuel and Food. Same flickering sign, same glowing windows. I slammed the brakes, heart cracking against my ribs. I twisted around, desperate to see if the first one was still behind me. It wasn't. The lot, the truck, the glowing sign, they were gone. Only the woods remained, swallowing everything in darkness. Ahead, the second station pulsed like a heartbeat. The whispers returned, louder now, crawling over one another in a rising tide of static voices. You don't leave. You don't leave. You don't leave. My vision blurred, my hands slipping on the wheel, and for one raw, terrifying moment I realized I wasn't in control anymore. The car was moving forward on its own, rolling toward the glowing door, as though invisible hands pressed down on the pedals for me. And then I saw movement inside. Not just the old man this time. Ships. Dozens of them crowding the aisles. Pale outlines with faces that refused to hold still, all with yellow eyes turned toward me, waiting. The car rolled forward no matter how hard I pressed the brake. My foot slammed the pedal to the floor, my leg trembling with the effort, but it was like pushing against stone. The wheel jerked faintly in my hands, tugged by some unseen force, guiding me toward the glowing glass door as if I were nothing more than a passenger in my own body. My throat burned with the urge to scream, but the sound lodged in my chest, strangled by the pressure building in the air. The laughter had faded into something else now, chanting. A low, droning murmur that rose and fell like a tide. The words were garbled, layered, in languages I didn't recognize, but the cadence carried the weight of ritual, of something ancient. The shapes inside the station pressed closer to the windows as I neared. Their faces were still blurred, shifting like water caught in motion, but their eyes glowed steady and unblinking, an ocean of yellow lights staring out at me. My headlights caught their outlines, and I realized with a jolt that their bodies weren't shaped right. Too long in the arms, too narrow in the waists, spines arched like broken marionettes. They huddled together in jerking unison, twitching as though moved by a single hand. My stomach heaved as bile rose, burning the back of my throat. The car jolted to a stop on its own. Right at the curb. The chanting cut off, leaving a silence that was somehow worse, heavier, like the air had thickened into stone. My hands slipped from the wheel, slick with sweat, and fell limp into my lap. The locks on the doors clicked up with a sharp snap. The passenger door opened. Not swung. Not pulled. It opened with a slow creak, deliberate, like a host inviting me inside. Cold air rushed in, reeking of mildew and gasoline, prickling gooseflesh across my arms. My body refused to move. My legs felt filled with lead, my lungs barely working. Then came the whisper, clearer than ever, curling right against the shell of my ear. "Come back inside." My head turned without my consent, snapping toward the open door. Standing there, inches from me, was the old man. Or what wore his shape. The flannel shirt hung loose, the same lines carved deep into his parchment skin, but his mouth still stretched impossibly wide, teeth glistening too sharp, too many. His eyes burned that same sickly yellow, fixed on me with hunger. "Cash only," he rasped, his voice cracking like dry wood. Something inside me snapped. I shoved the gearshift into reverse, tires screaming as the car lurched backward. The door slammed shut on its own, the locks snapping down again, and for a wild second I thought I'd escaped. But the woods behind me had shifted. No longer trees, but shelves. Endless aisles of snacks, dusty cans, glass jars filled with things that squirmed in the light. The gas station wasn't in front of me anymore. It was everywhere. I tried to scream, but the sound came out warped, garbled, like the broken voices from the radio. My vision tunneled as the fluorescent lights hummed louder, pressing into my skull. And then, sudden, jarring silence. I was parked at the pump again. Pump 3. The nozzle dangled at my side, dripping gasoline onto the concrete. The station looked the same as it had the first time, quiet, empty, the rust-colored pickup sitting off to the side with its door closed. The clock on the dash still read 2:13 a.m. For a moment, I sat in stunned disbelief, my body shaking, my brain clawing for logic. Had it all been in my head? A hallucination? Sleep deprivation? But then I saw it. On the seat beside me. The slip of paper. The same one the old man had given me. Only this time, the shaky scrawl didn't say, Pump 3. It said, "Welcome back." That I should have driven straight through, should have pressed the pedal to the floor and never looked back. That thought pounded in my skull as I sat gripping the wheel, staring at the slip of paper like it might burst into flames. Welcome back. 2 words, no bigger than a receipt note, and yet they carried the weight of a coffin lid sliding shut. My hands shook so violently the paper fluttered like a trapped moth before slipping to the floorboard. The clock still glowed 2:13 a.m., frozen in time, and for the first time it hit me that I might never see another minute tick by again. This wasn't a loop. This was a trap. I twisted the key in the ignition. The engine responded with a groan, but the air outside had shifted again, thick with that metallic tang, humming with a low vibration that crawled through my bones. I couldn't look at the station, couldn't force myself to, but my eyes kept flicking back anyway, like iron drawn to a magnet. The glass door was open now. Not swinging, not rattling in the night breeze, but wide open, as though waiting for me. Behind the counter, the old man was gone. Instead, the shelves inside seemed to writhe, cans and boxes bending like they were made of wax in the heat. Shadows darted between the aisles, too fast to catch, but the yellow eyes flashed steady. Watching. Always watching. I jammed the car into drive and lurched forward. Tires screeched against the cracked concrete, the smell of burning rubber filling the air, and for a wild second hope sparked in my chest. If I just kept going, if I ignored the voices, the shapes, the signs, maybe I could tear free of this nightmare orbit. But as the beams of my headlights cut across the lot, something stepped into their glow. The figure. The one from the pickup. He was out now, standing dead center in the lot, arms slack at his sides, shoulders hunched. His face was worse up close, skin too pale, veins crawling blue across his temples, mouth slack and wet. His eyes burned that same yellow, but duller somehow, like old bulbs about to give out. He didn't move, didn't blink. He just stood there, blocking the only way forward. I swerved hard, the car jostling as I cut toward the side exit, but the headlights caught him again. Not ahead this time, beside me. Then in the rear view. Then straight in front once more. No matter how I turned, how I veered, he was always there, multiplying like a glitch in the film reel. My breath hitched as sweat poured into my eyes, stinging, but I couldn't stop. Couldn't think. My only thought was escape. And then the radio came alive. A burst of static, sharp enough to make me flinch, filled the car. Underneath it, a voice, ragged, broken, dragging each word like a shovel through gravel. "You can't leave. Not yours to leave. Been here long before you. Fit. The wheel jerked in my hands, dragging me back toward the pumps. I fought it, veins bulging in my arms, but the pull was too strong, like invisible hands had locked onto the car, dragging it across the lot. The station loomed closer, its sign buzzing in a furious strobe, shadows writhing inside the glass like they were clawing to get out. My chest heaved, my throat raw, and I realized with a sick twist of terror that they didn't want me dead. Not yet. They wanted me inside. The steering wheel bucked like a living thing, fighting against me, the tires squealing as the car skidded sideways across the lot. My chest heaved with every breath, sweat dripping down into my eyes, stinging until everything blurred. The harder I fought, the stronger the pull became, as if the station itself had grown magnetic, dragging me toward its glowing doorway. The chanting was back, louder than before, echoing from everywhere, through the radio, the vibrating floorboards, even the grinding engine. Different voices layered together, some high and shrill, others guttural and low, yet all carried the same message: inside. 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 The glass door yawned wide, and the glow spilling out wasn't the flat hum of fluorescent lights anymore. It was warmer, almost golden, pulsing in slow waves like the beat of a heart. Against my will, my eyes locked on it. It didn't feel like light at all. It felt alive, breathing, watching me as much as I was watching it. My hands trembled, every nerve screaming to look away, but my neck stiffened, jerking forward as if strings had been tied to my skull. The closer the car rolled, the more that golden light began to peel back, revealing shadows moving behind it, shapes pressing up against the glass, eager, waiting. I slammed my fists against the wheel, screaming through gritted teeth, "No! No, you're not taking me in there." My own voice sounded small, swallowed instantly by the hum that filled the air. My stomach lurched with the sickening realization that the words weren't mine alone. I'd spoken, but the sound had been echoed, deeper, in a mocking chorus that came from the speakers, the vents, the very metal frame of the car itself. My voice was no longer just mine. It belonged to them. Then, just as the bumper scraped the curb of the station, everything stopped. The car stilled, the voices silenced, the hum cut off like a switch thrown in a dark room. For a heartbeat, the night was impossibly quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against your ears until you swore they'd pop. I sat frozen, gripping the wheel, lungs burning, waiting for the next wave. It came from the passenger side window. A hand. Thin, gray, fingers too long, pressed flat against the glass. The nails were black, sharp, tapping in a slow rhythm that vibrated through the glass like metal on bone. I jerked sideways in terror, my scream catching in my throat, but before I could react the hand slid upward, smearing something dark and wet across the glass. A streak of red. Blood. I threw the car into reverse, tires squealing, the night swallowing the lot as I tore backward. For a moment, hope flared again. Distance, space, escape. But in the rearview mirror, the lot didn't shrink. The station didn't fade away. It followed, glued to my sight, the glowing doorways stretching wider, as though the world itself was bending to keep me tethered to it. The farther I drove, the closer it loomed, a nightmare that refused to let go. And then the old man's voice, whispering low and steady, filled the car once more. "You've already been inside." The words froze me where I sat. "You've already been inside." My hands slipped from the wheel, falling limp into my lap, every ounce of strength draining away. The whisper wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a memory, a crack in my mind I didn't know was there. Images flickered behind my eyes, jagged and raw, too quick to grasp. A counter. Shelves. A flickering light above. My own reflection caught in the glass door of the station, but wrong. Its mouth smiling even though mine wasn't. I shook my head violently, clutching fistfuls of my hair, trying to shove the flashes away. But they stuck, like shards under skin, and the terror grew into something colder. What if I really had been inside? What if this wasn't the first loop at all, but the 100th, the 1000th? The car jolted, snapping me forward against the wheel. My eyes flew open. I wasn't on the lot anymore. The car was parked neatly at the pump, engine idling, the nozzle once again hanging beside me, dripping gasoline in steady drops. My heart sank to see it, because I knew I hadn't driven back. It had put me there. The slip of paper lay on the passenger seat again. My stomach clenched as I reached for it with shaking fingers, afraid of what I'd find this time. The handwriting was the same scratchy scrawl, but the words had changed yet again. "We remember you." A cold sweat ran down my spine, and for the first time, tears burned at the corners of my eyes. The words weren't a threat. They were a reminder. This place knew me. This wasn't some random nightmare I'd stumbled into. It had waited, patient, pulling me back like a spider to its web. I gripped the door handle, meaning to throw it open and run, but my hand locked stiff, frozen mid-turn. My body refused to move. My reflection in the window looked back at me, pale and gaunt, eyes too wide, but then it did something I hadn't done. It smiled. Slowly. Deliberately. The sight ripped a raw scream from my throat, but even as I cried out, the reflection didn't move its mouth. A faint shuffle of footsteps dragged my attention toward the station. The glass door was no longer open, it was closed, but someone stood behind it. Not the old man this time. A younger figure. Slimmer. Familiar. My breath hitched when I realized it was me. Standing there behind the glass, watching myself in the car. Only this version of me wasn't panicking. Its face was calm, composed. Waiting. The chanting began again, low at first, a vibration in my teeth, then swelling until the windows rattled. The reflection in the door tilted its head, mirroring the gesture I made when I tried to shake my head in denial. A sickening realization hit me. Maybe I wasn't outside at all. Maybe I was still inside, staring out, watching myself drive in circles while the real me rotted behind the glass. The clock glowed steady, 2:13 a.m. And for the first time, I noticed the second hand wasn't stuck. It was ticking. Backward. The backward ticking was faint, just a soft click, 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 but every sound jabbed at my nerves like a needle. My chest rose and fell in ragged bursts as I leaned closer to the glowing dashboard clock, praying I was imagining it. But no, the red second hand crawled counterclockwise, each notch stealing me further from the world I knew. The numbers didn't change, locked on 2:13, but the ticking kept on, dragging me deeper into something older than time itself. My stomach churned as the thought lodged in my skull. What if I wasn't counting forward through a night, but backward into a memory? Into their memory. A soft tapping drew my gaze to the windshield. My pulse spiked. A face pressed against the glass, smeared and distorted by the curve of it, yellow eyes burning bright. The skin looked stretched too tight, mouth wide in a grin that exposed teeth like broken glass. My hand shot for the ignition, but the key was gone. The slot was empty, a hollow circle of metal. The engine purred anyway, alive on its own, as though the car was no longer mine to command. The face on the windshield leaned closer, its grin widening until it split the cheeks. Then, with a wet sound, it slid downward, vanishing beneath the hood like oil draining into an engine. My gut twisted, bile rising, as the dashboard lights flickered and the radio burst alive again. Static first, then voices, layered, tumbling, male and female, young and old, all speaking in unison. Already inside. Already ours. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sound drilled straight into my skull, vibrating in my bones. My own voice joined in, warped and dragged, repeating the words until I couldn't tell if I was speaking or they were. The reflection in the window turned to me again, still smiling, mouthing the chant in perfect rhythm. My throat tore as I screamed, raw and useless. Suddenly, the world outside the car shifted. The station was gone. The lot, the truck, the trees, in their place stretched endless rows of shelves, illuminated by flickering fluorescence. Cans stacked high, bags of chips slouched on wire racks, bottles lined like soldiers. The car sat in the middle of an aisle too narrow for it to fit, yet there it was, snug between shelves that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. My breath came shallow, burning as I stared through the windshield. Figures shuffled between the aisles. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Their bodies twitched with unnatural jerks, Their faces blurred smears of flesh, but the eyes, always the eyes, glowed steady yellow. They turned in unison as if sensing me, their heads tilting with grotesque slowness until a sea of eyes locked onto mine. The car rocked gently as something scraped along the roof. Nails. Long, sharp, dragging a steady rhythm. My hands trembled so hard against the wheel I thought my bones would snap. Then came the voice again, soft now, coaxing, right by my ear though no one sat beside me. Step out. You've been here before. You'll remember once you're home. The words stabbed me with a strange, awful familiarity. For a moment, I saw myself walking those aisles, basket in hand, smiling at the clerk, the bell jingling as I left with a paper bag. Ordinary. Mundane. But the vision twisted, warping, and I realized the bag dripped dark liquid, staining the floor with red. My smile hadn't been mine. It had been theirs. The second hand on the clock ticked backward again. And outside the car, the figures began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, converging on me from every aisle, arms reaching, mouths splitting wide. The figures moved in jerks, like broken puppets tugged by strings too tight. Their arms reached outward, long fingers clawing at the air as their bodies twisted sideways, spines bending at angles no human could endure. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst, each beat shaking my chest with dull thuds. I slammed my fists against the horn, desperate for noise, for something to drown out the shuffle of feet and the clatter of jars tumbling from shelves as they pressed closer. The horn wailed, a sharp metallic cry, but the sound came out wrong, warbling, low and distorted, echoing back at me like an animal's dying groan. Worse, the figures answered. Their mouths snapped open in unison, releasing a chorus of sounds that imitated the horn, dragging it into a nightmarish parody. The noise swelled, filling the aisle, bouncing off the shelves until I couldn't tell where my car ended and they began. My throat burned with a scream, but even that wasn't my own anymore. The moment I cried out, the sound echoed from their mouths, hundreds of warped versions of me crying back in a hideous choir. The car rocked again, harder this time, as if dozens of hands pressed against it. Nails scraped down the sides, metallic shrieks carving through the frame, while a heavy thud landed on the hood. My eyes snapped forward. One of them was there, crouched low, its yellow eyes inches from mine through the windshield. The face was clearer than the rest, and my stomach dropped as recognition stabbed me. It was me. My own face, warped and gray, skin sagging, lips split, but undeniably mine. Its head tilted in the same slow, deliberate way the reflection had. Then it grinned, stretching my mouth into a mask of madness, teeth sharp and wet. My gut twisted so hard I doubled over, gagging into my lap, the sour taste of bile flooding my throat. The backward ticking of the clock grew louder, sharper, until it wasn't ticks anymore but hammer blows against my skull. My vision blurred with every sound, the shelves warping, the aisle stretching longer, bending until it seemed to spiral into infinity. My doppelganger slapped a hand against the glass, and the car's interior lights flickered. My reflection on the inside of the windshield moved separately now, smiling when I didn't, mouthing words that buzzed against my eardrums. You never left. The air thickened, pressing down until each breath scraped like knives in my chest. I clawed at the door handle, jerking it upward, but it refused to budge. The lock clamped down like a fist, immovable. My vision darted to the passenger side. The slip of paper lay there again. I snatched it up with trembling fingers, praying for something, anything, that might tell me what to do. 3 words this time. Pay the price. The letters bled as I read them, the ink running down the page like fresh blood. My hand shook so violently I dropped it, the slip landing face up on the floor mat. The moment it touched, the engine roared to life on its own, louder than before, as if the car itself was screaming. The headlights flared, casting long beams down the aisle, and the figures stopped dead in their tracks. Hundreds of them, frozen mid-step, their eyes blazing brighter in the light. Then one by one they dropped to their knees. The sound of bones cracking filled the air as they bent, bowing toward me in grotesque reverence. My stomach knotted, cold realization spreading through me. This wasn't escape. This wasn't freedom. They weren't trying to keep me out. They were worshipping me. Or rather, the thing they believed I already was. And as the backward ticking thundered, as the glow of the gas station's heart pulsed through the shelves, I felt it. A shift. Not in the air, not in the car, but inside me. Something was waking up. It began as a tingling in my fingertips, subtle at first, like the pins and needles of a limb fallen asleep. But instead of fading, it spread up my arms, across my shoulders, seeping into my chest until my heart thudded against it like a drum. My breath quickened, shallow and ragged, and with every exhale, the air fogged the glass in shapes that weren't mine. Faces. Dozens of them, pressed against the inside of the windshield, mouths whispering silently in sync with the frozen figures outside. I rubbed at the glass, frantic, but the faces remained, etched in fog that wouldn't clear. The rows of kneeling bodies outside shifted, moving in a slow wave as though they were breathing with me. Each inhale I dragged in, they straightened slightly. Each exhale, they bent lower. My stomach twisted as the realization sank in. They weren't bowing to me out of fear. They were sinking, matching me, becoming part of whatever rhythm had taken root in my blood. I pressed my shaking hands against my chest, trying to steady the frantic pounding beneath my ribs, but the beat wasn't mine anymore. It echoed, louder, stronger, vibrating through the car, shaking the shelves outside. A low hum rose from the kneeling figures, harmonizing with it, until the very ground trembled beneath the weight of the sound. "No," I whispered hoarsely, though my voice broke into static halfway through. My throat burned, raw, as the sound refused to obey. I tried again, louder. "No, I'm not one of you." But the words fractured, splitting into echoes that came from every corner of the car, each warped version layering over the last until I couldn't even recognize myself in them. The figure crouched on the hood, my own distorted face, tilted its head and pressed a palm flat against the windshield. My reflection inside the glass did the same. And before I could pull away, my own hand lifted on its own, pressing palm to palm with the image. A shock ripped through me, not pain exactly but something worse. A recognition. Like two puzzle pieces sliding into place. Images flooded my skull, too fast, too sharp. Standing behind the counter in the station, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. Watching strangers pull up, bleary-eyed and tired, sliding crumpled bills across the counter. Handing them slips of paper, always slips, each one marked with words that shifted depending on the person. Sometimes pump 3. Sometimes welcome back. Sometimes just a single, cruel word, stay. I saw myself, hundreds of versions, ringing up candy bars, filling coolers, sweeping floors that never stayed clean. A life lived entirely within the flicker of buzzing fluorescence. An endless night that never gave way to dawn. My stomach lurched violently, bile surging, and I ripped my hand away from the glass with a scream. The figures outside wailed in unison, their yellow eyes flaring brighter, and the shelves rattled so hard jars shattered, spilling black liquid that hissed against the floor. The car shook like it was caught in an earthquake, the backward ticking of the clock hammering louder, faster. I shoved the gearshift into drive, desperate, panicked, slamming my foot onto the gas. The car lurched forward, smashing through the shelf ahead in an explosion of wood and glass. The aisle shattered around me, cans bursting open, powder and liquid filling the air like smoke. I drove blind, lungs burning, tears streaming, only one thought pulsing through my skull like a drumbeat. Get out. Get out. Get out. But when the dust cleared, when the headlights caught open space ahead, my gut turned to ice. I was back at the lot. Back at the pump. The station stood before me, glowing steady, its sign buzzing, the door wide open like a waiting mouth. The clock read 2:13 a.m. And this time, the slip of paper on the seat already had my name on it, my name. Seeing it scratched in jagged ink across that slip of paper snapped something deep inside me. The letters were uneven, slanted, like a child's first attempt at writing, but they burned into my vision until I couldn't blink them away. My throat tightened as I picked it up, hands trembling so badly the paper rattled between my fingers. Beneath my name was a single word, written smaller, as though whispered onto the page, Clerk. The air in the car thickened instantly, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on my chest until every breath scraped like sandpaper. My vision blurred, not from tears this time but from something deeper, like the world itself was shifting out of focus. I blinked hard, and for a moment the car wasn't a car anymore. It was a counter. My hands weren't gripping a steering wheel but resting on a stained laminate surface. Behind me, shelves stretched into infinity, humming with that same buzzing glow. I gasped, shaking my head, forcing the vision away. The car returned in jagged clarity, the paper still in my hands, but the taste of dust and stale air lingered in my mouth. My heart thudded with dread, because I understood now, this wasn't a threat. It was an assignment. The gas station wasn't just trying to consume me. It was trying to make me part of it. The buzzing sign overhead flared brighter, flooding the lot in a pale, sickly light. Figures began to emerge from the woods, staggering out one by one, their movements jerky and stiff. Their eyes glowed yellow, their mouths slack, each of them clutching a slip of paper like the one I held. The closer they came, the more my skin crawled with the recognition that some of their faces were familiar. Faces I'd seen at real gas stations, at diners, on the road. Strangers, all of them. Strangers who had stopped once, like me, and never left. The pickup's headlights flicked on, casting long shadows across the lot. The figure inside finally moved, climbing out with deliberate slowness. He was taller than I expected, shoulders broad, face sagging with loose skin, but his eyes burned like fire. He clutched something in his hand, a crumpled slip of paper, and when he stepped into the light I saw it clearly. The word scrawled there wasn't his name. It was customer. The ground beneath my tires vibrated as the chanting rose again, a low, bone-deep hum that rattled through the glass. The figures circled the lot, their papers glowing faintly, their mouths moving in unison. The old man appeared at the glass door again, jaw unhinged, throat yawning into darkness, and for the first time I saw beyond him. Rows of counters. Registers. And behind each one, a person. Pale, lifeless, eyes glowing yellow, hands resting on the counter as they waited. Clerks. Hundreds of them. A raw scream tore from my throat as I tore the slip of paper in half, crumpling the pieces in my fists. The figures froze, the chanting cutting off mid-note. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. My lungs burned, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might split open. Maybe this was the way out. Maybe destroying it meant breaking free. But then the paper writhed in my hands. The torn halves pulsed, veins of black spreading across them, and before I could drop them they sank into my skin like ash. My veins burned hot, glowing faint beneath the flesh of my arms, and a voice bloomed inside my skull, louder than thought, louder than fear. You can't tear what you already are. My vision split, two realities colliding at once. In one, I sat in the car, chest heaving, sweat pouring down my face. In the other, I stood behind the counter of the station, slip of paper tucked neatly in my shirt pocket, waiting for the bell to jingle above the door. And through both, the clock read 2:13 a.m. Some nights, when I drive past lonely highways, I still see that station glowing faint in the dark, its buzzing sign calling like a lighthouse for the lost. I never stop anymore, not after what happened, but I know one day I will. That slip of paper with my name still burns inside me, buried deep where I can't tear it out. And when the clock strikes 2:13 a.m., I hear the doorbell jingle, soft and patient, waiting for me to come back and take my place behind the counter.